thank you all for coming. I think it's quite fitting we're actually in the Jet City Improv. And improv is very much based on trust, relationship, and using prompts to build scenarios. So we're going to try to build a certain set of scenarios around what we think and what we've learned this month about Hacking EDU, and we're going to be calling our students on stage to help us think through that. And we're also going to have Erika Wagner on stage to talk a little bit about incentivizing change.
So the X Prize Foundation has been around since 1996. We launched our first prize because our founder, Peter Diamandis, believed in the power of competition to incentivize radical change. And he had been sitting there reading the biography of Charles Lindbergh and realized that Lindbergh didn't just wake up one morning and decide to fly east, but in the early 20s, there were actually a whole series of competitions that were catalyzing the entire aerospace industry. He said, well, I wonder if that would work in spaceflight. And so you see the story here. The Ansari X Prize, we put up a $10 million purse in '96. Over the next 8 years, 2016 spent $100 million trying to win our 10. Paul Allen bankrolled the winning team to a tune of $26 million, and you sort of scratch your head and say 26 is greater than 10. But there's something about prizes. There's something about competition. And how many of you have ever been in a competition where the prize is a beer or a t-shirt? How much were you willing to do for that beer or t-shirt?
You don't want to know.
Way too much. So the power of competition, the power of prizes is sort of stamped onto the fabric of humanity. There's a way in which these competitions bring out not only the best in us and the best in what the world has to offer in terms of innovation, but they do it in a way that parallel processes through solutions. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm parallel processing a solution.
All right, fantastic. So parallel processing through solutions. Most of the time, particularly in academia, I spent a lot of time writing NIH and NSF grants when I was back at MIT. And I basically had to prove that I was the world's expert, show that I had already done the work, communicate that I was working with the best people that they already knew, and then they would give me some money, if I was lucky. The way that prizes work is the ultimate meritocracy. We say, we don't care where you came from. We don't care what your degree's in. We don't care what you've already done. It's about achieving. And I think that in the context of the discussion about hacking education, that's actually really salient. What we're looking for is not, are we going to have these students who have walked lockstep through the process, gone through all the right tests, been taught by the teachers that you already know are the best. But rather, are our next generation of students going to be able to demonstrate skills that are relevant to their own future? And I think that when we think about education at X Prize, we've been looking for years. We've been trying to identify targets for investment. Our last president was a gentleman named Tom Vander Ark, who came out of the Gates Foundation's educational efforts. And we've tried for years to try to figure out, where does a prize fit into the educational system? And we finally have given up and said, it's not about fitting into the educational system. It's about hacking education. It's about going around the other side and saying, what is success? What does success look like? How do we measure it? So we've been starting to do a lot of work in this area right now, focused mostly on educational gaming, on novel ways of bringing peer-to-peer learning together, and in other ways of sort of hacking the educational conversation from the outside. So I'm not here to give answers. The great thing about X Prize is that the power of prizes is that we ask really good questions. And I think that that's core to the debate around education. So my question to you is, what do you prize in education? What is success? And how can we help this community to get there? So with that, I'll turn it back over to Scott, but look very much forward to the dialogue.
So we're going to call our Expeditionary team up to the stage, and they're going to be presenting a recap of what we've been doing this month, synthesizing some of the ideation that went on in week 1, and then the idea is to move to some action. They're going to go for about a half hour, and then after that half hour, we're going to break up into groups according to you'll see the categories they're going to create. And we're going to ask, although they don't know this yet, we're going to ask the folks who are at our advisory dinner the second week to play a little bit of what I like to call the CWO, the Chief Worry Officer, and help facilitate some small group conversations. And we'll figure that out when we get there. But first, I'd like to introduce the team. Betsy, Kevin, Dan's going to talk with us, Harry and Katya now joining the stage, and they're all going to take the stage and take you through their parts. I'm going to bring up
help yourself to food and drink.
Yeah, and you feel free if you're hungry, thirsty, there's stuff. Eat, mind it.
Well, I think I still need you up here because we're going to do the
Yeah, I'm gonna be right here.
intro.
I'm not leaving.
So the only thing we want to start with is just sort of reviewing what we've done this past month. And Hacking Edu was really an idea started by MCDM students who were interested in asking some of the very same questions that Erika was just discussing and kind of figuring out how to start this hack. Some of those questions, for instance, are what is the value of a degree? And we actually asked a group of people this to you personally when you're hiring. And then also another example would be what are some necessary skills that should be taught to prepare students to succeed in today's job market. So we had hundreds of questions and tried to narrow it down through various events. And the first one was actually a happy hour with John Cook and Ben Ha. That was April 5th, and we have a little clip.
We're going to open it up for questions right now, so if anyone has something, just, we're a small enough room here, I think we can just yell it out, and Frank.
Ben, what's the role of K-12 in providing graduates to feed into higher education or informal learning situations?
Thank you, Frank. The question is, what's the role of K through 12? Is there a soapbox here? Because I'm going to stand on it for a little bit. I think it is absolutely terrible that this state is one of the most regressive tax states in the country. We are shooting ourselves in the foot for the next 50 years by not funding K through 12. Where do you think college kids come from, right? So I think the question you answered is, thank you so much for doing that, because I think you and I probably agree about this. We are under, it's frustrating. It's really frustrating.
Well, is there anything we can do? I mean, what is the solution in your mind?
We need to fund our schools. We need to fund our not private schools, public schools with all of our money, because I don't have kids, but I am more than happy to make sure that we have a better education system, because if I plan on being here and if I plan on my family being here for a long time, if we don't fund our K through 12, we're not going to have great college kids, and we're just going to have to rely on importing people to go to our schools, taking up our state slots. That's not right. We need to raise the ability for us to fund our children's future.
So then our next event was actually just 1 week later, and it was a round table with a smaller group and a few of you are here, and they actually created a very innovative table to capture this conversation in a way that wasn't in your face. So I think we have another clip and we also kind of seeded some questions throughout that dinner too, but it was a very organic conversation.
So quick bit about the food, but also let me give you some background on this table. Like Hanson said, it was designed and built precisely for tonight's dinner, but this table has been in the works for a long time, maybe since people started making tables. So this is the table. I don't know, not 2.0, but 10,000 or something. Nonetheless, I think of the table as arguably the first architecture. Shelter was a given. Table's one of the first, if not the first, intentional space. A lot of things have happened around the table. And one of the things that has been very frustrating is as we've gone to collecting culture in a different sort of way. We used to collect culture via telling stories or writing it down on clay tablets, and it got lost for thousands of years. But now we tell stories via digital media, via audio, via visual, and we put it out to the world. In the center is an old telephone pole. And the notion of the suspended, tensile kind of space that it really speaks to me about communication and telling stories. And obviously, the telephone was an advancement that we still use. So that's some of the work that's gone into it. We literally got together Chase, Scott, and the guys over at Northrop Case, am I saying that right? Northrop Case, really talented woodworking shop that donated all of their time to make this, so we could have this conversation because they believed in it.
So from your introductions, we know you all are already excited to talk to each other, but just to kick it off, our first question is really, what is the value of a degree today? And that can be from any perspective, like you yourself, how do you value your individual degrees? Assume we have some people here. And then also when you're hiring, you know, what is the value of a degree when you're looking at a potential new employee? So I think dinner is on its way shortly, and it's a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Enjoy your dinner.
Thank you.
Thanks, Betsy.
Can we give a round of applause, please?
I think you should start with the question.
Okay, we'll start with this question, what's the value of a degree? I think as someone who runs a business and hires a lot of people, there's strong signaling going on with a degree. And I think the signal is along two vectors. One is how hard was the program and school that you went through? So I have a sense of how hard you can work. So I went to, my brother went to MIT, and I spent about a year and a half there hanging out with him and some MIT folks after I graduated from college. And what those folks are put through is way beyond what I was put through at college. And I went to a pretty decent school. So the signal to me when I get a resume from someone from MIT is that this person can take a serious beating from their work and keep ticking and finish it and go through to the end. And the other signal is the social proof signal of who were you in school with, and what social network do you bring with you when you come to work with me. And those are extremely, I think, valuable from an organization's perspective. And those two signals still come through pretty loud and clear.
I think that's right. For me, the degree is not actually the first thing I look at.
I'm sorry?
I said, for me, the degree, when I'm hiring, the degree is not the first thing I look at. Right? The first thing I look at is, if it's a creative position, portfolio. Portfolio speaks to me much wider than degree. Because you can have a brilliant artist, who's never gone to school is going to get a lot more consideration from me than one who's got a great degree, even from an MIT. Same with engineering, same with design. So the portfolio speaks to me much wider, much louder than the degree. I agree in terms of the value I do place on a degree is indeed the stick-to-itiveness, the ability to seek something all the way through to completion, which is, you need an indicator of that because you're counting on that when a person comes in to work for you. So it is a factor, but it's not my top factor.
So then last week we actually had a live taping of Four Peaks in Red Square during Husky Fest, and I believe Scott's going to take you through.
I'm going to take you through just a quick tour. I just got the DVD of the show, but I haven't had time to put in the computer yet, so you're going to see some screen, just some stills from the event that took place out in Red Square as part of UW Husky Fest, the 150th celebration of the University of Washington. And prior to that, we actually taped the open of the show out above on Kane Hall, looking over the square. And then we were asking questions, what's the power of the college degree? For those who don't know, this is the teleprompter that guides Hanson on the pathway of his conversation.
Robot.
Yeah, there it is. You can see the space in the room. We actually had the stage up there and the crowd participating. We had 4 guests, but it wouldn't have happened without our power team. And if anything from the day, I think if we just left this image on stage, I think we'd call this event a success. So just take that image in for a second and let's give thanks to our team. Yeah. Yeah.
She was behind stage.
I was sleeping, just taking a rest.
We actually had the control room behind the curtain there, so it played the wizard role. Hanson doing his interpretation. Who's interpreting here? There you go.
Charles Foster Kane.
And Katya helped us give a recap at that time, although because she spoke last week, felt that she could get out of speaking today, but we're going to get her on stage anyway, so you're not out of it yet. We had guests like Gene Floten, who's the Chancellor of Western Governors University, talking about online education, and we try to really push her on this idea of assessment and the role that the facilitation and nurturing of understanding, can you get that in an online environment? She had some interesting things to say about that, and I think there's some affordances and constraints we can really push on that topic. I was really excited to get to know a little bit about Zoran Popovic's work from Computer Science and Engineering, who's created a game called Fold It, which is a crowdsourced game to understand proteins. And he's also created this game, they call it Home Play, and it's a math game that's really exciting that my third grade daughter just can't put down since I introduced it to her the other day. So it's really cool. And I think he's done some stuff with you guys as well. So to know, and we heard of Zoran basically when we were at South by Southwest when he was mentioned there. So sometimes you don't know what you have in your own backyard. So it's really exciting to hear about his work. And I love our silhouette shot. Is that one of yours, Dan? Yeah. Yeah. Dan Thornton taking photographs. Give it up for Dan. Thank you very much. Then we had Ruby Love Smith, who I think, is she?
No,
she's
Ruby, not here.
Not here. From Washington STEM, because we really want to talk about science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, because that's a lot in the dialogue today. How are we effectively training, preparing our students to go into the types of careers and jobs that are necessary in the 21st century? And many people would argue no, and she was arguing with that. But we also wanted to counter that argument with the argument that came out of the state legislature in Rhode Island, the STEM to STEAM movement, by adding the A back into STEM, so it's science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And we had Mark Gonzalez talking about that and also demonstrating a piece, a very powerful spoken word piece that we'll be able to see the first Wednesday at 8 o'clock on UWTV. That's my grandmother who says always be pimpin', so that's the commercial. Improv, and then we had where we brought all the guests back on stage, put Hanson out in the audience, and you can see some of the questions that were asked. We actually have them here on stage as an artifact or a prompt for you all to look at. That led to a rather interesting conversation that I thought could have gone on much longer than the time we allotted, but we needed to get out of there because there was a dance party happening right after our show and they needed to get the DJs in. So there's our folks on stage and Jonathan asking a question that turned out rather well. So that was last week. The show will be on UWTV, and then after it premieres, each segment will be available online as I guess a digestible chunk. The idea is to use social media to build a buzz towards the event, extend it through our broadcast, but then have these chunks available either on demand or to be used as whoever may see fit, included into a blog, blasted out as a newsletter, built into a website. Okay.
All right, so okay, you guys can hear me anyway. It's not a very big room, and I can be loud.
The mic is recording up there. We'll use it for video later.
Oh, okay. So I won't run away from the mic. Thanks, Hans. So throughout this month, all of us were attending these events and kind of following the conversations and the topics. And some issues kind of rose to the top. We kept hearing them repeatedly throughout the conversations. One obviously is open source content and open source education. And I mean, we've seen, even just in this last month, big innovations like with Coursera. And for us, when we were thinking about this, with open source content in particular, we really have to think about how people are using it and if they're using it wisely or in the right context, and if they have the sort of literacy they need to actually work through that information.
Define open source.
Oh, just content. Basically, if we don't go straight into the open source education component, just open source content, there are students now, when Wikipedia went down for SOPA and PIPA, they were like, oh, I can't do my schoolwork anymore. So yeah, just there's a lot of information that students can access now, and whether or not they know how they're, like what they should be reading, understanding, absorbing.
John, do you want to define it a little further for everybody since you asked?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Do you want to define it a little? Do you want to explain?
Join in. Pop up.
I was curious on what precisely you were meaning. I mean, in the sense that Well, okay, with Wikipedia, you can you can't alter the content. You can.
Leave it there. I got it.
Well, I mean, I was just thinking of the typical rules that we have with open source software. You know, you can alter the source code and such, and there's a crediting function in most of these communities. But also, you need to have a benevolent dictator like Linus Torvalds who will, you know, make the ultimate decision. Jimmy Wales calls himself the benevolent dictator of Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm.
So, who's going to fulfill that role?
Yeah.
It's not. It's just some ideas.
Great. Yeah, all of these, we constantly have more and more questions coming up through that, and we'll kind of get to how we want to address the never-ending flow of questions when we get to our final how to start to hack EDU. And then one of the other things that we kept coming up was the skill-based education process, and how nowadays it really does need to be agile and continual, much as Hansen often says that the MCDM is permanently beta, because I mean, the field we're studying in particular is changing constantly. And then one thing that we saw, and I think Scott just mentioned that, about how we had this great individual doing amazing work in our own backyard. One of the things we think really important moving forward is breaking down the silos within academia and bridging community initiatives. And then, as we also heard in the conversation around the table, accreditation is still something that's important. And the value of a degree is not just, you know, is not totally disappearing now, and it's still something that demonstrates how someone is able to complete a project, how hard they work, and that sort of thing. And then we had two huge issues that kept coming back, something that we do not have a solution for, but still needs to be addressed. And one of those is the digital divide, because when we keep talking about all of this, online content and technology as a solution, it's an incomplete promise, because technology does not actually reach everybody right now. So if we keep focusing on what we can do with that, then we forget about a whole giant portion of the population. And as Ben Huss said in the beginning, like, we have to think about K through 12, because if we don't have those K through 12 students, then higher ed is mute at that point, or moot at that point. Mute too, actually. Mute and moot. And then the final thing was that we actually don't think higher ed itself is in crisis. We actually think the real problem is with the funding, and that is a huge policy and culture issue. So in order to start to change something like this on a societal scale, we need to keep asking these questions, continuing the conversation, and engaging our communities to take action. And so we're left with these big issues, not something we were able to solve in 1 month with one program, but we, as communicators and connectors, have an initiative to put forth that by next April we'll make some progress towards tackling these issues. And Kevin will take us through our April to April.
So we thank you guys all for being here very much. And you know, I think the key for us was taking a look at everything. So there was a lot of information that came in. And really beginning to understand that it really starts at breaking down the silos and the barriers that have been formed by traditional academia. And we see this happening across the board online, from open content like Coursera, MITx, AI from Stanford. And we also see this, you know, in other areas, from peer-to-peer university, where we see social learning really beginning to happen. We see it on Facebook, again, peer-to-peer university, and we see it across the board. We believe that these questions are imperative to tackle and to really understand. But we don't believe we can understand these until we grow the right community and we bring the right people to the table and have that conversation, and then begin to really deep dive into what's going on. So we believe that we'd like to start it off with a call to action to kind of do an audit of the University of Washington, of the Northwest, to really understand who are the players in this space and what they're doing, and how each of them can come together and really start to make differences and make the change. We want to do this by creating a documentary series that goes around the Northwest and really focuses on each of the individuals that are doing the work. Some of the individuals you've already seen, and some we haven't seen. And then we want to move up, and we really want to see what's going on around the United States. Meanwhile, we're going to bring this community together, and they're going to really begin to tackle some of the questions that you all have and that keep coming up. And we want to unite them with a portal, an online portal, very similar to what you've seen. I would say, if well, some of you may not have seen it, but some of the portals that are coming out right now are really focusing on uniting people through social learning in a community similar to peer-to-peer university, similar to Coursera, that you've heard again and again. And we want to bring this in to the community and to our program and open the door to community building, access to the information, a way to disseminate that information out, and really telling our narrative and telling the story and allowing people to tell theirs. Because we feel that's one of the key foundations of what will make the change, essentially. Everybody has that slate.
You've mentioned Coursera several times. We should actually explain it, because it only happened like 4 days ago.
Good point. Sorry, you caught up. So Coursera is a new initiative. It's open content, so it's free classes that have been put up online from places like Princeton, Michigan State, and MIT, Stanford, and really about 39 universities have really kind of lent information, classes, and video, pretty much set up through video. And you can access anything from network analysis to really artificial intelligence to other types of mathematical classes. Similar to, I don't know if everybody's familiar with the Khan Academy, which is flipping the classroom. And that, again, is where we want to begin to focus. So you'll see here, you'll see the Connect. Connect is about bringing that community of players in Washington, in the Northwest, in Seattle, at the University of Washington. Engage with that community by building, that portal, by utilizing the internet and online space so that we can really bring in that conversation and spread it out efficiently. Integrate blended learning. We feel that it's really important that what we start to accomplish is both online and offline, so that we can begin to put ourselves into the most challenging areas, particularly when it comes to digital divide. There's a lot of places, particularly like Garfield and other rural schools, that have no access to technology. You see this globally, and there's solutions being rolled out in terms of SMS technology, mobile technology. But what does it really mean? And can we really make a difference in education without tackling that major issue first? And then sharing. Sharing what we learn, sharing what we create, curating what other people are doing, and aggregating the information we feel that is really beneficial to start pushing this. And we hope that all of you guys will join us in kind of a little journey, if you will. And I just wanted to, one more thing, particularly the MCDM program, and I want to introduce Dan Thornton, and he will give you a little bit of background on basically his new initiative that's coming up.
Yeah, hi, thank you all for coming, and thank you all for such a great month of events, and thank you all to the main organizers here for making this all happen. It's been pretty awesome, and I think it illustrates...
Actually, Rose, just
yeah.
take her.
Yeah. Where is she? But I also think it illustrates one of the opportunities that we have in higher education when we take advantages of opportunities. And the great thing about this was an opportunity that was basically student-led, and that's great. On Monday, we at the MCDM introduced a innovative program in the form of a new fellowship, which will be based at the MCDM. And I was the program is kind enough to give me the opportunity to actually author that initiative in partnership with Anita Vernon Cross here. Basically what it is, it's a model of mentorship and service learning, bringing alumni back into the program to mentor incoming cohorts of students coming in, and in exchange for that, be able to participate in the culture and education of the MCDM going forward. One of the tenets of that is that each cohort of fellows will actually engage in design challenges, and one of those I think we're pretty safe in committing to is a design challenge to work with this continuing April to April sort of Hacking Edu initiative, which is being born this month. So that's something that I'm particularly proud of. And it illustrates as a privilege of being a part of this program that this program is willing to sort of reward initiative with opportunity. And I think that's a key value that sometimes we lose both in K through 12 and in higher education. So I want to thank the program for seeing that opportunity and allowing the students and alumnus to continue to participate in those challenges. So thank you.
Speaking of alum,
I'm the only one who gets to use cue cards. Thank you for your attention and for being part of this crowdsourced experiment. What do you value? What's your prize in EDU? I'm going to and get to there later. I also want to say thank you to Erika, to Raheem, to Susan for sticking with us for the whole month. And we're actually going to take the next few minutes as a crowdsourced experiment to take these broad concepts and try to focus them laser-like on what we can do to make those actions happen in the next 12 months. And I don't want to overlook skill-based training, because I think one of the reasons you're here as a paramedic, as a firefighter, is that we have a lot of industries where the old model of, exactly, of the folks who know the knowledge and the folks who get it as apprentices are beginning to fade away. We need to keep that, we need to capture it, and we need to keep it moving forward. So this is about higher education in a lot of ways, but it's really a lot about hacking education in general. So we're going to take the next 10 or 15 minutes, we're going to break into 4 separate groups, one under the banner of each of these 4 initiatives. And Erika, Raheem, Susan, and I'll call on Anita to each be along with one of us from the Expeditionary force to start to lead the discussion. We've got 4 questions that are pretty focused that we want everybody to kind of crowdsource answers to. We're going to come back 20 minutes from now and present them back to all of us. And I'm also going to relish for a moment the fact that I got my Alfred Hitchcock moment in the Michael Hebb table as I went across the back. I love it. Enough of that. Let's go to 4 separate corners of the room. Grab food and drink. We'll spend from now until 5:30 talking about these things. These are questions meant to prompt you. They're not the only questions. Let's bring up the other questions that are on your minds as well. And we'll be back here at 5:30 to talk about it.
So everyone start making their way to the stage, whether that's your expeditionary team or your chief worry officer. And we're going to hear what we learned and what we maybe have to learn some more. And do we know, are we going Connect first?
Yeah.
Okay. So the Connect group, which Harry Haywood helped us go through, and Susan helped us back there. We're going to let Harry go. Go, Harry, go.
I'm sorry. This is true improv. Thank you, all of you, for that ending conversation. It just went on and on. We filled 2 pages, pretty much. Our question was, who needs to be at the table to move these initiatives forward? What voices need to be represented to give us the things that we can move forward with? And I'll summarize really quickly, and then we'll move on to some more substantive things, I think. Obviously, industry, education, policymakers, and that kind of thing. But the more interesting conversation centered around students. They're the ones who are the receivers of all this. We're renting our planet from them at the moment. And those include not just high school students, but veterans and folks who are now in the job market and maybe have completed all or part of their education as they saw it when they went into it. And also those folks who are in a career development situation where they're trying to figure out what their next move is. So those voices need to come into this conversation. And also, obviously, there's a disconnect between electeds and what goes on in the schools. And we need to somehow bridge between those two and use this conversation, this mechanism, to bring all those kinds of folks together. I asked each of them to come up with one idea of how to connect this community together. This is hard. This is a really hard thing to do. And a lot of it was built around how do we find a common ground, a common interest, a common incentive. Maybe it's a contest, maybe it's a prize, maybe it's simply a community of practice where folks with some like interests have a chance to voice them in a forum that they can do off-Broadway, if you might say it, where it's freedom to fail, where they can speak their minds, where they're not going to be yelled at by somebody else or heckled from the audience. So let's try to provide those kind of opportunities and hope to build this community starting from that. Yeah, John? Okay. So moving on to
the engaging, which actually followed sounds like a very similar conversation, because our question was, how do we build an infrastructure to connect this community internally and to the public decision makers at large? And then immediately we wanted to start talking about who's in this community. And many of the individuals in our group were quick to point out that who's missing from the conversation, even right now on stage, we all are students, but we're grad students. So where are the learners in this? And are they a part of the decision making? We talked about going to observe them and seeing what solutions they're finding to solve education problems right now. But we are also cognizant of that includes both the young and the lifelong learners, not just specifically K through 12. So then we ultimately talked about how to start to connect these individuals. It has to start like what we're doing, face to face in these conversations. It has to start on the ground before we can jump to some sort of online portal that can connect everyone. And then ultimately it's a community problem, and we need support from the community to actually engage students in education. And what am I missing, guys? We talked about so much, and it was like all over everything, because this is such a huge problem. But yeah, I mean, ultimately we went back to talking about community, involving those learners, and starting from the ground up. All right, now let's integrate.
Yes.
Integrate, Kevin.
Integrates. The question is, what are we integrating?
Yeah.
That's a big question. Well, our group, it's kind of big. How do we integrate the findings in all of this and throughout these communities and wrestle with and make them actionable projects? So, I mean, the actionable projects part, we didn't nail into that quite a bit, but we got a lot of actionable ideas. And I think it comes down to one of the things that were said was great: how to behave in the sandbox. How do we get them all to learn? How do we all, begin to learn to behave in this new space? And a lot of what we're talking about was kind of that real world experience, the critical skills, open content, technology, social learning, and kind of that understanding of peer ranking, and a lot of we're getting to know what we can trust and where that is. And so I think one of the key things was what are students facing? And again, we're coming back to the students. What are they facing? And I thought that was great. So if we were to do a big actionable piece, it would really begin to look at that. Let's tell their stories and see what they're facing.
That's right. Hey, so I'm Steven. I'm not at UW, but I got crowdsourced into this position. So we talked about sharing, something we all have heard from a very young age. So the question was, where does the funding come to move from action ideas into proof of concept or viable business prospects? And we talked a little bit about equity, but I'll just read this to you kind of raw, because I'm not one of those woo people. But so we talked about investment and industry supporting the future workforce. So the idea that someone will do kind of a scholarship. Companies can do scholarships and also kind of expect you to work for them afterwards. That was something we talked about. Also talked about the balance between the exploration and accountability during college. The Enlightenment ideals of going and eating olives under a branch and thinking about things, and then versus what you have to produce in college and what people expect of you, especially if you're working or if you want to get a job afterwards or whatever the case is. Also talked about community investment, so Kickstarter or different things like charter schools or vouchers, that kind of thing. Also, we talked about kind of funding the institution at the state level or the national level, and what state isn't broke, right? There's never enough money to go around for some things. But the flip side of that is that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste, and you can use that as a big opportunity to try and do a lot with little and radically rethink things if people are open to that. Jumping to the top, integrated matching the community's needs with student learning. So I was one I totally didn't get, or I didn't get all of, but so kind of more vocational with what the community needs,
or applied, like there are some applied opportunities if there was a need in a community that could be blowing out the doors of the classroom so that they're actually getting into the community and doing things there.
Like Microsoft and Boeing would have particular needs in our community, and rather than importing them from somewhere else, maybe we could actually teach them.
Right. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you for that.
No problem. You're rocking.
Also, we said don't assume the blueprint, regional, state, local specificity. So you can have it scale, but maybe only in places that will have the right chemistry for it. There's a lot of specificity in education with funding, with the composition of the classrooms, that kind of thing. If we had visibility of the different specificities, that would make it easier to try and help them scale. And then the last thing we talked about was crowdfunding plus equitable distribution, plus a big heart, I said jokingly, but also kind of you need to be selfless if you're going to share your money with people and kind of give that away. And that's your return on investment sometimes. And then the big takeaway was that the source of the money really does shape the story and the outcome. Managing expectations or understanding expectations is really important in trying to understand what people will expect of you at the end of their investment. So, kind of money.
Give yourselves a hand because you are the focus group and you got us started on the right road, I think. So, give yourselves a hand.
Now I'm inspired. No, we won't go there. We won't go there.
Drop the mic.
No, we'll slow jam the Hacking Edu. First of all, we just want to thank our students for the tremendous amount of work that they put in for this month. We talk about change needing to be incentivized, but they weren't getting credit for this. They weren't getting paid for this. We may have given them a little bit of pizza and some drink, but other than that, this has really been their drive and their passion and their hard work to get us where we are. So I just want to thank our students for this. And really, as the MCDM program, being committed to this April to April, moving from this ideation phase of this month into actionable steps, we really want to invite each and every one of you in this room to continue to play with us as we put these ideas into action. We're not quite sure how that'll take shape. It may be an independent study, it may be an internship, it may be a course, it could be a doc series, it could be a tremendous partnership with our friends at University of Washington Bothell. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. See, okay. So you look at your screen, I got you up, so that's good. And it may be more partnerships with our folks from Weber Shandwick, or from the Chamber, or from the Gates Foundation, or from Startup EDU. I don't know how we work EMT into this, but I think we're there. Because not only are we reactive, we are proactive in thinking about the action that we want to take. I worked for a former vice provost who said to me, I'd get called in his office every 3 months, and he'd say, Scott, expectations are future resentments. Tone it down. You're setting the bar too high. Good thing about this, I'm still at the university and that he isn't. I want to raise that bar, and I think the expectations need to be raised because this is important stuff. We can no longer be accountants of education. We need to become nurturers of our students' learning and be able to foster that to the next level. And that's what we've been doing this month. So I'm looking forward to the next steps we take and the next steps that we take together. We want to invite you up for the food and the drink. We're going to continue the conversation, but in a less of a microphone way. So again, thank you all for coming and joining us for our 4th event of Hacking EDU from Tower to Town Square. Thank you so much.